In this course, we're going to look at basic video editing in Adobe Premiere Pro. Premiere Pro is a powerful video editing software. You can do just about anything you can think of, and it has even created feature films. It's a great program. When you first open it, you're going to see some recent project lists if you've used it before. That way you've got a shortcut to quickly get to your projects. If you don't see your project listed there, you can always go to Open Project and directly open it. And you can also start a brand new project, which is what we will be doing in just a moment. There's also this Learn button. If you click that, you will see a bunch of tutorials that you can go through and follow to learn new skills or to brush up on something you need a reminder on. At the bottom, you can also go and find more tutorials from Adobe if there's other things that you'd like to learn. And so those are great resources. So let's go ahead and we're going to open a project. In fact, we're going to start a brand new project. And you're going to get a bunch of different options, some of which might look confusing. And what I tell my students is don't be, worried about all those options. There's really only two of them you need to worry about. Number one is giving your project a name. And number two is telling the project where to save to. Typically, this is not going to a location where you want it to, and you definitely need to go tell it where to save. I currently have got a folder for all the assets or all the files I want to use in this project. And it's good practice to save all of your files, your music, your pictures, your video clips, and your project file all together and have them named how you want them and those types of things. So you can see currently I've got music, got a bunch of video clips, and even a few pictures here. Once I go ahead and change my location, we're going to save it in that exact same folder. So I've given it a name and I have changed the location. Once I hit OK, that's going to go ahead and open up a new project to work on. And we are now into the project. If I go look back in that same folder, you'll see it has now generated the project file for me to work on that I can save to and open in the future. Now, something to point out is sometimes it's much better than it used to be, but Premiere can crash or freeze up. And typically video projects take longer, so you don't want to lose your work. Premiere will auto-save by default about every 20 minutes. So at some point, about 20 minutes, it will generate an auto-save folder, and every 20 minutes or so, it'll just create a new backup so that I don't lose all my work. But I don't want to lose 20 minutes of my work, so I just get in the habit of hitting Control-S often and saving. And so first thing to look at is kind of the layout of the workspace here. Up along top, you've got different workspaces, and it's basically just these different panels laid out in a different way that makes it easier depending on what you're trying to do. If I'm trying to do assembly, bringing in my clips and organizing them and bringing them in my timeline, it's going to make the project panel, which is where all of your clips live, bigger. If I'm editing, that's going to go smaller, and then my timeline is going to be bigger so I can work. If I'm doing color correction, I go to the color workspace, and then basic ideas here. It's just going to give you a different layout for your different options to make it easier for you to work in, and you can even create your own custom layout. If for some reason things get completely disorganized and messed up, and it's not how you want it, and you've lost panels, you can always hit the menu button next to your workspace, and you can reset it, and everything will go back to the default location, which is helpful. Premiere is set up in these little panels, right? And as you saw me do, you can resize them as you'd like. If you want something somewhere else, you can click and drag it, and you can relocate it and different things like that. So it's basically these panels. You can even pull them off, and put them in different locations all together. We've got a whole different section now. But like I said, you can always go reset it if you need to. Now, from there, the first thing we probably want to do here is bring in our assets. And assets is just a term for the files you're going to use in a project. Could be video clips, could be graphics, could be sound effects, could be music, all those different types of things. There are several ways you can do this. You can go to File, Import, you can hit Control-I, you can drag and drop them into the project panel. I typically just go ahead and double click here in the blank area, and that'll do the same thing. And then you just need to go ahead and navigate to your files. So here is where we're going. I don't need this, but I want everything else. So I'm just going to go ahead and drag a box around everything, hold down Control, deselect my project file, and just open it all up. Once it is open, you can see all those projects now live here inside the projects panel. Currently, I'm in icon view, so you can see this icon is of a graphic or an image. These ones with the little purple film strip are video clips, and then the green audio wave means there's audio with it. So these are video clips with audio. This one is just video with no audio, and this one is just audio. You can also click on this icon view, and you can see them a little better. It's really a small workspace here, so I'm actually going to go to the assembly workspace so I can see what I'm doing. That's much better. So if you have a video clip, you can actually do what's called scrubbing. You can just move your mouse over it, and you can actually get a preview of what those video clips are, which is pretty helpful. All right, so you can see what the clips are. Okay, and that one we don't need. So you can also, if we're here in editing, if you double click on one of these clips, it's going to open it up in the source panel. So you can kind of see the original, see the different parts of the original. Down here, this is your timeline, and this is the place you'll edit. And once you have a timeline, this is where you're going to see your work, what you've done as far as editing goes. So let's go ahead and start a project. Typically, when I start a project, it's pretty easy to just drag and drop a video clip in here, and it will start a new timeline for you that's the correct size. Because most video clips are shot at a similar aspect ratio, right? They're going to be probably the same resolution. And if you know that the clip you're working on is the size you want in the end, it's very simple to just click and drag it, and it will create you a brand new timeline, and you can just start working on that. If you look back in your project panel now, you'll notice you've got a new icon, which is this. That is your sequence or your timeline. You don't want to delete that because that will actually get rid of all of your work. The other way you can create a new sequence is you can go to File, New, go to Sequence, and if you have specific settings that you want, you can come in here and you can change it up. So you can go to something like HDV. Maybe we want a 1080 video at 30 frames a second. You could start yourself a new timeline and have something like that. So I'm going to go ahead and delete that one. If you're working with just pictures, you don't typically want to just drag a picture in to start a timeline because images are all very, very different sizes, and that could completely change it. So for example, if I grab one of these images and drag it in, that one actually looks like it's the correct size, but oftentimes they will be too large or too small or different dimensions. So that's not something you typically want to do. Now, one thing to point out before we start is, as I mentioned, it's good to have all of your project files in a folder, in a location to start with, and not really to rename them or move them afterward. And here's why. So if I go ahead and start a timeline, let me grab, I'll grab this clip and put it here at the end. So I've got this this video clip, and then I've got this image at the end, right here, and that is this picture. So if I go into here, you can see that's the same image, and if I simply just take this and I'm going to cut it and I'm going to paste it here, watch what happens when I come back in. So immediately Premiere recognizes it's lost that file, and you can see here in a whole bunch of different languages it says media offline, which basically means you either renamed the file or deleted it or moved it, but I don't know where it's at. So Premiere basically is just has links to all the different locations where the files live and what they're named, and if you change the name or the location, it will lose the file. Now that doesn't mean all is lost here. If you want it in the location you moved it to, you could always just move it back, but if you've renamed it or you've moved it and you need it to be that way, you can always just hit locate, and you can go find that clip and tell it exactly what clip it is, and it will relink it, and it will go back to looking good or looking normal. If it doesn't give you that option, you can always just go right click on the clip and say link media, and you can go do the same thing and link it up. But this is not something that's very good to see because this will actually export in your video, and so it's good to just have everything you need in the folder to start with. So I'm just going to go ahead and move that back in, and it's still like that. It lost the link, so I could just right click on it, link media, and I'm going to go hit locate, and I'm going to go look for that picture. Actually, it was that picture, hit OK, and it links it back up and it puts it back in my project. So that is how you fix those things. So as for basic editing, I mean, all there is to it really is you're just taking your files and you're just going to put them into your project in whatever order you want. Okay. If you want to see your work, you can click and drag this current time indicator, this marker, through your clip. You can hit play up here. You can hit the space bar, which will stop and start the play. Any of those things will work. Beyond that, right, you're just putting in different clips. You know, this looks good. Maybe we'll get a fire. Get the clip of the fire in here. If you drop a clip onto another clip, you see it actually cuts the clip off. So that's something you don't typically want to do. So just be aware of that. But you can drag things around your timeline. I've currently got 3 different video tracks and 3 audio tracks. And that's so you can have multiple things on screen at once. So in audio, it's easy to imagine having someone talking, having music, having different layers of sound effects all at the same time. And so that's why you'd have all these tracks. You can have even more than that and even more video tracks. Maybe you want a picture like this, you know, up here at the same time. This is on screen. So currently this is covering it. But if I take this image and I shrink it down, right, you can have multiple things on screen at the same time. So we then hit delete on my keyboard, get rid of that. If you need more tracks than 3, you can actually take your whatever it is you have selected, drop it up here in the blank area, and it'll create, you can see a 4th track, and you can go 5, 6, 7, 8. You can just keep going up, and I don't even know of a limit. You can go quite a ways up. So once you start getting your clips in, you're just going to go ahead and arrange them in whatever order you like. You know, those look pretty decent. Let's see if there's any other clips we can add to this. We'll add the waterfall in there at the end. And then from there, all right, let's go ahead and zoom out a little bit. To zoom in or zoom out on your timeline, you can hit the plus key or the minus key, or down here on the bottom, you can just take this bar that will kind of move through your timeline and drag it. But you can click on the bar or the dots at the end and drag. Click and drag. That'll zoom in or zoom out on your timeline to make it easier to see. Something I like to be able to do is see the icon of what I'm working on as well. So you can either drag the border up and down, or you can hold down Alt and just roll on your mouse, and that will open it up so you can see the icon of what it is you're working on, which is helpful. To lengthen or shorten a video clip, like this is very long, you can actually just hover over the end until you get that icon, and you can drag it back. Right? So that's cutting the clip. You can bring back the video as well. If you do that same thing to a graphic, it's just going to make the graphic stay on screen a longer or shorter period of time. Another tool that's helpful to know about is the Razer blade tool right here. You can actually click and split clips, and now that one clip has been turned into 3 clips, and I can, you know, delete the middle out if I needed to for some reason as well. So you can change your clips that way. So I'm going to go ahead and make this quite a bit shorter so we've got something quick and easy to work on. So we take that, let's shorten that down. You can right click and ripple delete it, or you can, you know, drag them back one by one, or you can drag a box around all of them and you can move them. Right, we've got some just quick clips inside of the timeline, which is great. If for some reason you have an image inside of your timeline and it's too big or too small, which let's see if this one might actually be, this one I think is a little bigger than the timeline, you can always right click on the image, and you can do the same thing with video, and you can scale it to the frame size. And you can see that actually shrunk it down so that either the top and bottom or left and right are touching. In this case, I actually want it to take up all of the room, so I'm going to hit Control-Z and I'm just going to leave it like that. But I can, you know, reposition it as needed. So something like that looks good. So I would do something like that. But in this case, I'm going to go ahead and delete that and leave it off. Next thing we could do is add some transitions. Transitions are basically effects that take you from one shot to the next shot. If you're watching television, the most common one you'll see is called a cut. It's really no video effect at all. It's a straight jump from one shot to the next. But there are also other ones you can add that you might see sometimes, like a fade, or if you're standing in line at a wedding, you'll see all kinds of interesting ones for like a montage. But those effects, those transitions live here in the video, in the effects panel, or you can actually go to effects up here and get the effects workspace, and that will relay out your screen, and then you got your effects up here on top. So inside the video transitions, which is the bottom folder, there are a lot of different categories of transitions you can use. The most common one you might actually use is in this dissolve folder. It's called a cross dissolve. That's why it's the default transition. That's why it's got that blue box around it. You can just take your transitions, you can drag it, and you can drop it between clips. And when you do that, if we play over it now, you can see it's slowly going to fade from one shot to the next. If I zoom in, I can also hover over the end, and I can make that fade take longer. So it's much, much more slow to happen. Or if you click on it up here in the effect controls, which are the properties for it, you can adjust the length of it up here as well. If you don't like it, you can click on it, and you can just hit delete, and it will go away. There are a lot of interesting ones. Like I said, most of these you probably won't use, but there's some interesting ones in immersive video. So just to give you some examples here, I'm going to pull a few of these in, and we'll watch through just these three. Right, and so some you may not use. But as you click on certain transitions, you might have options with them, so you can change the look and the feel of those specific transitions. I'm not going to actually leave any transitions here, but I am going to put a transition on maybe the title. So let's next look at how to create titles. So there's an old way to create titles, which is going away soon. You can go to File, you can go to New, you can go to Legacy Title, and give it a name, hit OK, and it's going to tell you right here, hey, at some point in the near future, the legacy titler will be gone. It's not gone yet, so let's look at how to use it. Go ahead and hit OK. It's going to open up this titler window with a bunch of options. You can create shapes. You can create shapes with a pen tool. You can type vertically and horizontally, and there's a bunch of different options. You might end up seeing something on screen like this. That's not actually a part of your title. It's just that is where my marker currently is, and so it's showing me that in case I want to create a title, around something for when I place it on screen. If you don't want to see that, you just hit the eyeball here in the corner. But you can literally just take your type tool, your text tool here, click, and put in something like title. If I double click on that, I can click and drag, I can scrub here, and I can change all sorts of things about that. Let's try something like that. And font style, you can do bold and italic and all those things. You can do small caps. You can change the color of whatever it is. You can change the position. You can change the spacing between letters or lines. You can add a stroke to it, which is basically an outline. You can see there's a black outline on it now. I can change the color of that outline. I could make that outline thicker or thinner. I can put on shadows and all sorts of different things like that. So let's look here. Right here's your drop shadow. Put a little drop shadow on it, pop it off the page. There's lots of different things you could do. There's alignment options as well. I can center it, vertically and horizontally. I can center the text. Lots and lots of different options. If you don't want to create your own, there are also options down here on the bottom. Let me go ahead and make this a bit bigger so you can see. There are a bunch of different preset styles, and you can use that as a base and then kind of work from there if you want. Right? So there's different styles in here you can use and customize as needed. But if you like what you've got, once you're done with it, you can go ahead and actually just hit close. You can hit the red X. That will now live in your project panel. You can then just drag it and drop it out over a clip like this or something, and you can see there's now a title there, right? The other way, the new way to create text, is to take the text tool down here on the bottom and go ahead and click wherever you want that to go. And then from there, right, you're going to select that, and you can go to the graphics workspace up here on top, and that's going to show you, right, your layers of text. Right now we've got this one. You might be on Browse, but if you go to Edit, that's going to show you all of your different options to be able to change this text. You've got your alignment options, you've got opacity. If you want to make it somewhat see-through, you can do that here. You got your different text options like we just looked at a bit ago. Let's go find something a little bit different. All right, that looks good. Change the color. You can put a stroke on it like we did before. Let's put some sort of black stroke on it. You can add a drop shadow, kind of pop it off the background if needed. Lots of different options like that. And then when you're finished, you can go back to editing, and then maybe we just want, simply to have that text kind of fade in and fade out. I'm going to go ahead and just take my effects. I'm going to go into my dissolve here, put a cross dissolve on the beginning, cross dissolve on the end, so it fades in and fades out. And then as I hit my spacebar, you'll see video starts, fades in, plays through, and then just fades back out. Now there are a whole bunch of other types of titles now built into Premiere Pro. If you're in the graphics workspace, you can go into Browse, and you're going to get a whole bunch that are ready to use and customize. Some of these include motions, and so they're referred to as MOGRTs, a motion graphics template. But if you find one you like, you can literally just go ahead and take it, drag it, drop it out on your timeline. And once that's out, you can see it's there. And this one, in fact, is a lower third that's animated. So if I hit play, you'll see it animates onto the screen. So to edit this, right, you can just double click, and you should be able to change the text if you can actually get to the text. Let's find it. There it is. I'm going to go double click on that text. I can go in and change the text to whatever I want. And you can see it's going to actually just animate out same way. It's not just the text. You can edit other things as well, right? You can kind of isolate the parts right here. If you need to figure out where they're at, you can click on those. Maybe I want this to actually be, the color of the fire. So if I select that eyedropper, maybe I get an orange like that. And that did not change. Let's try that again. And you see it changes the bar. So you have complete control over how to customize the look of these templates. I actually don't want that one, so I'm going to delete it. Maybe we would want something else. Let's look at one more type. If you can't find what you're looking for, you can always search for it. Search for basic. I'm going to go ahead and just take this and drag it, drop it out there. And we have got just a very basic title to start with, and we can work with that. So lots of different types of graphics and titles that you can use, or you can create your own. So we've got a video so far. It's looking pretty good. Next thing to work with here is sound. Let's work with the sound next. So I'm going to go ahead and go back into editing, and I'm going to look into my project panel, which I can't see. If you lose something, you can always go to Window and go and click on it, hit Project, or you can hit, if there's this little arrow, that means there are more, this little chevron icon. Click on that, there's my project, and there are all my files. My audio file is on the bottom, so I'm just going to go ahead and take that, drag it, drop it out here, and I'm going to go ahead and play it. I currently hear nothing. That is because I think my audio is set up incorrectly. So if that happens to you and you can't hear anything, you can go up here to Edit, go to Preferences, and come down to Audio Hardware, and just double check your speaker and your microphone are correct. So my speaker is correct, and it says it's not working, and it says that my speakers, so my mic's working, my speakers are not. So let's see, let's try it again. So it's still not working. So once again, we can come in and go to Preferences, go to Audio Hardware, and just momentarily, I'm going to swap these to something different just to see if it can maybe fix itself. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to swap these back to what I want them at. And hopefully it's now working, which it sounds like it is. So that's where you can change your audio settings if needed. So here's my audio on the bottom. I think it looks great. It starts out how I would like it to. Problem is if this is where my song ends, I don't want to have all of this extra music. if I do that, the video footage is going to end. It's going to turn to black video, and I'll just have music for another 30 seconds or 20 seconds, whatever that equals. So you could just take the end and drag it back, but here's the problem with that. It just completely stops. It doesn't fade out. It doesn't sound very good. So there's a couple ways you can fix this. Number one is you can come up here into your effects. You could go into the audio transitions, and you could put something like a crossfade. Take a constant power, pull that onto the end, and then let's actually zoom in just a bit so we can see. Maybe make that a bit longer, and that should fade it out. And it still kind of cuts off a little bit at the end, but that starts to fade it, as you can hear. The other way to do it that is more effective is to actually keyframe it. A keyframe is basically just a marker that tells something what to do and when to do it. So, for example, this is my audio. I can't really see all the options currently, so I could drag this down, or I could just hold down Alt again and roll my mouse. Once I do that, you'll see a line running through the audio. That is the volume line. You can make the entire thing louder by dragging it up, or quieter by dragging it down, or you can make it silent by dragging it all the way down. I think the volume level is fine. It just needs to fade out at the end. So here's how you do that. You can add keyframes. Currently my keyframes are not showing. If I open this track up even bigger, there they are. That diamond is a keyframe. So if I click here, it adds a keyframe. And if I move over my marker, click again, I can then drag that second one down, and that will slowly fade out. I typically don't worry about clicking on the keyframe here because I just hold down Control, which is a shortcut, and I just click on the line wherever I want, and then I can just drag that down. So that will slowly fade out. Let's listen to that, see how it sounds. Much better. Good gradual fade, and ends how it should. So that's how you can fade your music in and fade your music out. So the next thing, let's look at how to do color correction and color grading. So there's going to be times when your clips don't look like you want them to. Maybe the color is off from the camera settings. Maybe you want to add a general look or style to your footage. The way to do that is by going up here to the color workspace. So I'm going to click on color, and then from there, the next thing you'll need to do is put your marker over the clip you want to color, and then actually select the clip, and that will give you options to color that clip. When I'm doing this, I typically like to make this as big as it can get, just to help me be able to see, so I'm going to resize this a bit. So something like that is better. And there are several different options inside of color correction. So first is your basic correction. Right, this is looking a little bit on the cool side. So if I warm that up a little bit, I like that better, right? So you can change the color temperature. You can also take the white balance eyedropper, and you're like, okay, this is supposed to be white, and it actually makes it pretty close to correct. If you have a slider that's off, and you're not sure how to get it back to the center, just double click on it, and that will put it back to 0. But I actually think that did a pretty good job, so I'm going to leave that there. You can then change the exposure, all right, the amount of light in different areas. So the exposure is going to make your whole image brighter or darker. I'm going to actually go ahead and make this a bit brighter. But now my whites are kind of blown out. I've lost some detail. So maybe I want to go in and pull the whites down slightly in the highlights. Right, you can see it pulls a little detail back into those whites. Contrast is going to make your darks darker, your lights lighter. If I pull it down, you can see it kind of gets faded. And honestly, if you're not sure exactly what these do, just like I tell my students, just slide things until it looks good. You'll kind of get a feel for how it works as you experiment. Maybe it's a little bit dark in the shadows. We can pull a little detail back in there, but you can just adjust this as needed. You can always hit auto, see how that looks as well. Sometimes it does a decent job, but I often like to just do it myself. So that is that section, right? If you want to see the before and after, you can hit the check box, right? Before, after. I like the after a little better. You've got your creative section, which is next. And this is where you can add preset looks to your video. So if you find one you like, let me just say we like this one, I can click on it and it applies it. You can increase the intensity of that look, or you can decrease it if you don't want it quite so intense. but I actually want this to be back to none. But that's how you would add preset looks, and then you can adjust from there if you want. You can add a faded film look, you can sharpen it, you can change the vibrance and saturation, which maybe I'll show in just a minute. But basically both of those are going to increase the color in the image, right, or decrease. So I'm going to go ahead and increase the saturation just a bit on this shot. So here's the before and after there. Here's the overall before and after. So there's before, there's after. It looks better, I think. Next is your curves, your RGB curves. You get kind of your photography work curve here. You got your lights here, your darks here. So you can actually create custom contrast this way if you want to. You can adjust, you know, just the light parts of the image or just the dark parts, things like that. And here's a fairly new feature that I really like. So you have complete control over colors individually inside of Premiere. So your hue versus saturation is basically helping you change the amount of saturation in a specific color range. Hue versus hue lets you change a color to a different color. Hue versus luma is letting you change the lightness of that color, and then you've got some other options as well. So hue versus, let's try hue versus hue first. If I take this eyedropper and I select this color of green, you see it kind of isolates those greens, and you can even adjust that if you need. But as I drag it up, you can see it's now changing those to like purples. Actually, that looks pretty good. I like that. You can change it down, you know, it makes it more of a blue. So you can actually just slightly change or drastically change those colors. So it looks like we got some red flowers in there. I actually really like that. I'm going to leave that. Maybe I want to change those colors though. So I'm going to change the saturation of that red now. So I'm going to go select that kind of reddish tone, and as I change that, you can see it's going to make them, you know, brighter or darker. So I'm actually going to change, I'm going to add a little more saturation to that. So you can see the before and after. And you can change the luma, which is how bright those, you know, that specific color is. So I pull it down, it's getting darker. If I pull it up, it's getting brighter. So let's call it good about right there. So I'm going to leave that alone. I'm going to call that good. But you can see, you know, before, after, quite different. Much better looking now. You got color wheels and match, so you can change the shadows, the highlights, and the mid-tone colors. And you can even do a color match, which is a fairly new feature, which allows you to make clips look like other clips and try to match the color of them, so you don't have to do this on every single clip. We've got HSL secondary, so you can isolate certain colors and change the specific colors. And then you've got a vignette, which allows you to kind of put that burnt or light edge on a certain area. So, you know, something like that. So we got our before, we've got our after on the colors. I think that looks much better. So that is color correction, right? One thing I did want to point out that I mentioned is the difference in vibrance and saturation. Those two are very similar. It's just that vibrance protects skin tones. So for example, if I pull down the saturation color, you'll see it completely goes black and white. If I pull down the vibrance, you'll see it goes black and white mostly, but the red-orange tones are still there. They're muted, but they're still there. So it doesn't affect those tones as much. So if you have somebody's face in your shot and you're increasing saturation, probably a good idea to use vibrance to make their skin still look natural, but increase all the other colors in the image. So that's kind of the difference in those two. So our shots are looking pretty good here. I like it. Something I would like to point out about audio is down here on the bottom. You not only have control of your audio tracks, you can record directly into Premiere. So let's go look at that. I'm going to go ahead and kind of close this track down and roll my mouse. So I've got an open track here. If I'd like to record, I need to hit that little microphone and basically arm that track for recording. So if I click on it, it's going to start recording. But it's also going to play the music at the same time, so it's going to double that. It's going to double it up. It's going to sound bad. So if you want to record, make sure you mute your other tracks, and then you're going to go ahead and record into your new track. So just hit that. It's going to give you a countdown, and you can start recording. This is a voice recording, and as you can hear, it's echoing back in my speakers as well. So I'm going to go ahead and mute my speakers and try that again. So I'm going to click on it and go ahead and record one more time. it is summer vacation and I definitely want to go to the mountains. And you can hit your space bar and you can go ahead and stop it. And you can see that now lives, that recording now lives inside of here. It's vacation and I definitely want to go to the mountains. Okay, right, and you can adjust that however you want as well, right? Speaking of these buttons, right, that will mute a track. The S will solo a track, so it will only play by itself, or whatever tracks are soloed. So we have got recording in there also. A couple last things. Let's look last at how to use video effects. There are a lot of video effects in here. They're very, very powerful. So let's go into the video effects section and look at those. So we have a video effects folder that is full of a lot of different effects that you can use, right? And they range from very, very simple to very, very complex. So for example, maybe on this clip, this very first opening clip, we want to turn it to black and white. If you know where the black and white effect lives, you can go find it. You can also just search for it. Black, white, right there it is. But let's just go the other way just for fun. So inside of image control, there it is, right? So if I take black and white, I can just drag it and drop it on the clip I want, and you can see it instantly takes effect. Now, this is a very, very simple effect. It does not have a lot of things you can change about it. In fact, it doesn't really have anything you can change about it. If you want to delete it, you can simply select it in your effect controls, and you can hit delete and it goes away. I'm going to go drop that back on. There it is again. The FX button next to it will turn that effect on or off. And in this case, we have some masking options. I can't really change anything about the black and white, but I can mask it. So you got two preset shape masks. You got circle and square. You can also draw your own with the pen. In this case, I'm just going to demonstrate with the circle. And you can see I can reshape this however I want. Right, and I can, if I want to feather the edge of the effect, I can feather it. You can see it just gradually goes in or out. Right, and I can move this wherever I want. So that turns that part black and white. And then if I hit inverted, that's going to flip it backwards. So the only color now is inside of that circle. So you can mask effects that way as well. Let me show you a different effect. If we go into somewhere like generate, here's lightning. If I drop lightning onto this clip, right, we could create some lightning up in the sky. And I have got a ton of different parameters that I can change for this. So starting point, right, maybe this is supposed to be like way up here coming from off the screen and striking across the sky. That actually looks kind of cool. It's good color for it. I can change the number of segments, like how much it breaks up. I think wherever it was at 7 was a good place. There's a lot of things you can change about it. The color, all sorts of different things like that. Okay, so if we go ahead and play that, right, it should just strike, but it takes place the whole entire time. Well, how do we get it to not do that? Maybe we just want a quick lightning strike. You could just take your razor blade tool, chop a few pieces, and on this first clip, now that's 3 clips, I can just delete the lightning. I go to the properties for the second clip, delete the lightning, and it just exists right there, right? So I play through and lightning really quickly, right? But there's a lot of things that you can change about the lightning is the point. Let me show you one more. Maybe we want to create like a homemade vignette. Let's try circle. Okay, here's one called circle. And you can do this inside the color now, which is why they're getting rid of it and obsolete. But let's drop that on. And it looks like it just messed up the clip, but it didn't. You have a lot of control over it. So here it is. Let's see, let's first of all change the blending mode to normal so we can see through it. I'm going to invert that. Let's make this a little bit bigger. And now we're going to go to normal. There we go, now we can see through it. Instead of white, maybe I want black. And I'm going to keep growing this till it's pretty close to those edges. And I'm going to go ahead and go to feather, open that up. I'm going to feather that edge. And I've created my own homemade vignette out of circle. And it's got all of these different properties to it. So the thing about these properties is they all have this little stopwatch. You can keyframe all of these so you can change the effect while the video is playing. So for example, maybe here at at the very end of the clip, let me mute this, maybe we would like this to slowly, the circle to slowly shrink until the clip is gone. So maybe starting at about this point, we go right here to where it says radius, and I'm going to activate the keyframes. I'm going to hit this little stopwatch, and you can see it places a keyframe there. And then I'm going to go to about the end of the clip, and by the way, this is a mini timeline of that clip. I'm going to go to the end of it, and I'm going to change this, right? I'm going to click and drag, and you can see it slowly, it added a keyframe automatically. I'm going to slowly just shrink this down until it's gone. So from point A to point B, it's going to slowly go from the larger circle until it fades down and shrinks. And you can do that to anything that has that stopwatch. You can animate or change any of those effects. All right, so we've got a video. We're going to call our video good here. And when you're finished with your video, nobody could really watch this. All it is a project file. You need to actually turn it into a video clip. Otherwise, they'd have to have the project file and all of the clips in the same structure with the same name. It gets kind of complicated. So just turn it into a video file. To do that, we're going to go to File, to Export, and then go to Media. If for some reason media is grayed out, just click in your timeline, go back there. I'm going to hit Control M. That should open that back up. There it is. And here is your export settings. You've got a lot of different codecs you can work with. And what I have my students use is H.264, and that will basically turn it into an MP4, which is compatible with just about everything, and it's good quality. And there's a lot of options here as well, which can be kind of confusing. So what I will typically tell my students is to change it to an H.264. So just make sure you choose the correct format. And then the second thing that you want to do is go to the output name and tell it where to save and give it a name. So I'm going to click on that. I'm actually going to save this right to the desktop, give it a different name. And I'm going to hit save. Okay, from this point, we're going to hit export, and it's going to go ahead and put that clip together. It's pretty short, so it's going to be very fast. The more clips you have and the more effects you put on those clips, the longer this process will take. And it also depends on the, how powerful your computer is. But I just got a little dialog box down there that told me that it's completely finished. Before we go watch it, let me show you this, right? We've been working on this for quite a while. If I go back into my folder where all my files live, once again, you'll notice there's the project file. But I have now got a motion graphics template folder because I created that earlier on. I tried to put a motion graphics in there. It's also got audio, and it's got my autosave folder. So it has saved 2 different versions, maybe 3 of those. It's autosaved for me, so if I lose my work at some point, I have got versions of it going back in time. So that way I can for sure get most of my work back, which is a nice feature of Premiere. And you can change the frequency of how often it changes that by also going into edit, going to preferences, and you can change a lot of different things throughout these. So if we go look at the file now, we've got a finished video. You go ahead and play it, and you can see that I've got a problem, right? There is no audio to this thing, and here is why. If we go look back in my timeline, I actually have those things muted. So if you have something muted, or if you have one of your video tracks hidden, when you export, that is actually going to show up in your finished video. So you'll want to make sure that everything is how you want it to look, everything is visible, nothing is muted, and then when you export, it should work. So now let's go try that one more time. We'll go back in, we'll make sure the format's what we want. We'll click on output name. I'm going to go ahead and replace this video, and I'm going to hit export. Now, one thing to point out is this queue. What this queue will do, if you want to keep working in Premiere, but you need to export, you can actually have something else. You can export it using Adobe Media Encoder. And that way you can queue it up and add several things to this, and it will export them, but still let you work in Premiere. If you choose the export option in Premiere, then it kind of freezes up Premiere until it's finished exporting. So you can add things to this. You can then hit play, And once they're done, you'll get a check mark and it's done. And that allows you to continue working in Premiere at the same time. In this case, we don't need to do that. So I'm going to go ahead and export it one last time. That's great. We'll go ahead and replace this and we'll hit export. It will quickly export the video. Yes, we would like to replace. And once that's finished, we can go out to the desktop, play it, and here is the finished video. And this is something I would have my students do to start with, is just find some basic clips, learn how to use the titles, how to color correct, how to add sound, and just experiment with effects and learn how to export, and it's a good starting project. And that is how you do basic editing in Adobe Premiere Pro.